We come to our final reading in this series on John's Gospel, and we're going to hear again a passage that we read on Remembrance Sunday. It's from John chapter 15, some words being spoken by Jesus to his close group of friends, the disciples, as they share together the meal that we've come to know as the Last Supper. Jesus said, and he's still saying, "I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, so that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Remain in me, as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If you do not remain in me, you are like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire and burned. If you remain in me, and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends, for everything that I learned from my Father, I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit, fruit that will last. And so whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you. This is my command: love each other." Amen. May God bless to us this reading from his word. So in this passage today, Jesus is giving the well-known image of himself as the vine and his followers as the branches. Connected to him, remaining in him, we can do things. Disconnected, we're at a loss. We're looking at this passage right at the end of the series on John's Gospel, and we're doing this for a reason. The reason is that in John's Gospel, it is to be found among the chapters which describe the farewell speech of Jesus at the Last Supper. It's part of the final words that Jesus is saying to his disciples before he leaves them. It's part of the same long conversation that says, "Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I prepare a place for you, I will return again, so that where I am, there you may be also. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give unto you. Not as the world gives do I give. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid." This is all part of what biblical scholars call the farewell discourse of Jesus. So we're having it at the end of the series because it comes towards the end of the life of Jesus. But it also relates very powerfully to one of the key messages of John's Gospel, which we have continually referred to as we've looked at other stories. And the key message is this: John is at pains to point out that the Jesus who, for example, once turned water into wine at a wedding in Cana, can still turn the water of our lives into rich wine. That the Jesus who met a woman at a well and gave her living water to satisfy her inner thirst can help us all to have our inner thirst satisfied. That the Jesus who did things then, by his Spirit, still does them today. And this passage gives us the picture of the followers of Jesus remaining united to him as branches are to the vine. And as they remain united, the life flows, energizes, and bears fruit. Remember, as we've said also, John was writing his gospel around the turn of the century, maybe 70 years after the death and resurrection of Jesus, which happened in the early 30s. Among the issues which the Christian communities at that time, the early churches, would be facing, would be the question of, it's many years now, many decades since Jesus was here on earth. What does it mean to follow him now? They would be asking that then. And John said, he did these things then, and he does them now. And these words still speak to us 2 millennia later. And John also wrote, listen to his words. Listen to the picture he gave of the branches which are part of the vine. And so this picture is a very relevant one for us today, especially as the churches in Scotland and Western Europe are facing such challenging times, wondering what the future holds for us. Who are we? What are we? We are branches connected to Jesus. And as long as we remain connected, his life will flow in us and through us. But of course, it's also saying, if we don't remain connected to Jesus, the inner spiritual life will not flow, and our inner being will shrivel up. If we remain connected, the life that's flowing will quite naturally bear fruit. But if we don't remain connected, then there will be no fruit. Maybe not that many of us grow vines, but if you imagine something like a honeysuckle, or a wisteria, or a clematis, or even an ivy, as these plants get established, their green-growing branches attach themselves to a fence, or a tree, or some trellis, anything really. Now imagine you took the secateurs, and for some of the branches you snipped them, somewhere back close to the ground, close to the main stems. What would happen to the branches that were affected by the snip? They would remain held in position because they're set in their ways. But come the spring, when the sap is flowing, leaves and flowers will arrive on all the branches that are connected. But in those that are not, only dead wood will remain. Okay, that's a good image, but what does it actually mean for us in trying to be practicing Christians in the 21st century? Well, perhaps the first thing this image can do for us is to offer us a useful rule of thumb, a diagnostic tool, if you like, for determining how healthy we are as individual Christians and as churches. So let's hold these two images of, say, the honeysuckle or the vine. One is of the branches that are connected and through which the sap and the life and energy is flowing, and they're stretching out, making new green shoots to go further along the trellis and producing flowers or grapes or whatever. And the other is holding on, gripping, like grim death we might say, but no life is flowing, no green shoots that are making fresh connections. Now let's close our eyes. And let's think about, first of all, our own life and our own spiritual journey. Things like being aware of the gentle touch of God on our heart. Things like praying. Things like drawing upon Bible stories that relate to our life. Are we more like one or the other of the two honeysuckle images? One with branches that are connected and through which the sap and life and energy is flowing, and they are stretching out new green shoots to grow further along the trellis and producing flowers or grapes, and the other gripping like grim death, but no life flowing, no green shoots making fresh connections. A genuine question: where are we in relation to these two images and the life that's flowing, or not? Are we more like one than the other? And let's think about our experience of church. When we think of the church, do we think of being with others who are drawing upon their faith to support and guide in the challenges of life? If we went to an evening class in photography, or painting, or baking, or car mechanics, we would be sharing tips and ideas with other people and asking questions like, how do you do that? Because when I try it, here's what happens. Go and show me. Is the church a group of people whom we can ask questions like that? I don't understand that Bible story at all, but I do like this one. It seems to speak to me. Sharing experiences, sharing questions, sharing learning. Again, is our experience of church more like one or other of the honeysuckle images? One with branches that are connected and through which the sap and life and energy is flowing and stretching out, new green shoots to grow further along the trellis and produce flowers or grapes. And the other holding on, gripping, but no life flowing. A genuine question: where are we in relation to these two images? Are we more like one or the other, individually and in churches? I would guess that for many of us, whichever bit of honeysuckle we see ourselves like, and however we experience the church, and wherever we are between these two, for many of us, it might be fair to say, we wish, and I speak for myself, we wish we were more like the one with branches that are connected and through which the sap and life energy is flowing and that they're stretching out. But let's not get depressed if that wee exercise showed us that things are maybe not quite as far towards this as they should be, and they're maybe a bit scarily close to this side. Stepping on the bathroom scales can, certainly for me, be a potentially depressing experience. And depressing experience is one way to look at it. But stepping on the bathroom scales is also a wee reminder it's time to rein things in a wee bit. Do a bit more walking and so on. It's useful. We wouldn't go as far as to say it's a diagnostic tool, but it's a helpful guide to something that needs to be done. Taking stock is always a useful thing to do, and it can guide us on our way forward. And so also thinking about how closely connected are we? How much are we allowing the Spirit to flow, the juice to flow, the life to flow? So if we wish we were more like the branches that are connected, what can we do about it? Well, that's what John's Gospel is speaking to us about. Precisely that, because these Christians 70 years after the death of Jesus, how closely were they feeling connected? And he tells them how they can be. And so 2,000 years later, it speaks for us too. So the stories of what Jesus did back then, first of all, they are a crucial key for us. There's real power in these stories to connect us to Jesus back then and to the same Jesus whose Spirit is with us today. So it is important to read the Bible stories and to try to relate to them and to see how they connect with our lives and how our lives connect with them. Just thinking back over this short series in John's Gospel, is there one of the stories that you particularly liked You liked them all maybe, but is there one that particularly seemed to speak to you or puzzle you or whatever? Would it be the wedding at Cana, the woman at the well, the healing at the pool, the man who'd been there 38 years, the feeding of 5,000, light of the world? Greater love has no one than this, that they lay down their life for their friend. Was there one of these stories that, more than the others, seems to just reach out to you at this moment? You might like to take time to find that again in John's Gospel and read it 2 or 3 times, and think about it, and think about what it's maybe saying to you. Now, keeping the stories alive does not mean an unthinking adulation of them. Because in some stories in the Bible, in many stories in the Bible, there are things that puzzle us, things that we don't understand. In some of the stories, there are things that we really find ourselves struggling to believe happen just like that. Sometimes we think, would Jesus say that? Sometimes in the Old Testament, we think, would God really want people to do that? We recognize that as stories are handed down, sometimes they're tweaked, edited this way, sometimes spun that way, to try and make a teaching point. And the work of biblical scholars can help us with that. So we think questioningly and intelligently about the stories, but we do that because we're taking the stories seriously and to see what they're saying to us. And as we do that, we will find Jesus in them. So that's one point. But as we take these stories seriously, we will also find ourselves. Just looking back again at the stories we've looked at, we might have seen something of ourselves in the host, who really was anxious now because the bar had run dry. He'd invited all these folk. They'd run out of wine, and the fear of humiliation was incredible. Maybe somewhere along the line, something in that story resonated with us, resonates with us. We might have seen something of ourselves in the woman at the well. She had some complications. She had a thirst. She had an inner struggle. We might have seen something of ourselves in Philip, who saw 5,000 people to be fed and wondered, how are we going to do this? You and I are there in the stories. We just need to look and be open. And if we're willing to approach them with hearts and minds that are open to recognize ourselves, we will do so. And as we see ourselves, and as we connect with what Jesus did back then, and what he does in the story, there is a start of a link. So even if some of the branches have been either snipped and cut, they can be rejoined in this way of doing it. We would maybe struggle to rejoin branches in our honeysuckle that have been cut. Too bad, too late. But in this flow of the spine, the vine, it's a metaphor, it's an image, and the reconnecting is perfectly possible. So we reconnect with Jesus through the stories, but we also connect with Jesus through our own inner life of prayer and reflection. At the end of the day, it can be good to look back over the day and to look at the ebb and flow of the day, to walk through the day and to allow the events of the day to speak to us. That person who spoke to you, but you had to rush away because you had something to do and you were meeting somebody or whatever it was, but something they said kept ticking over in your head. There was something important in what they said. What is it? Think about that. Pray about that. And then leave it and see how things unfold. That time when you were doing something and you've done it often, but this time you felt a wee bit different. What was it? There are moments each day which we very quickly gloss over, but which are significant moments. It's good to take time to walk through the day and collect these fragments, because the God who is present with us all the time, whether we are conscious of him or not, that God will be trying to speak in our hearts through the people we meet and through the things that happen to us. And as we pay attention to these little inner moments, we're paying attention to our inner life and we're reconnecting with God. And another aspect has to do with our life as a community of faith, as a congregation, as a church. What is our primary focus? What is the core business of the church? It is to love God and love our neighbours, and to be a supportive family or community of people who are trying to love God, to love their neighbours, and follow Jesus. And an interesting question, a helpful question, not a critical question, but again, a question which can help us to always reevaluate what we're doing and refocus. To what extent are our churches helping you to love God, to love your neighbour, and to follow Jesus? And to what extent are you helping other people inside the church and outside it to love God, to love their neighbour, and to follow Jesus Christ? Now, to be helped to love God or to help others to love God might sound very holy, but it's really practical stuff. It's about feeling encouraged to think about our faith in God and about finding hope and meaning in life. It's about finding time and effort and stimulation to pray, to read the Bible, and to relate it to life with all its nitty-gritty and its challenges and its problems. It's about finding encouragement to think of God as a living, real part of everyday life. And it's about being encouraged and challenged to care about other people in this world, both near and far. The church exists to fan the flame of faith and the life, the spirituality, the life in the vine, to feed the flame, to nurture the sense and experience of being connected with Jesus, with God, and with the Holy Spirit in the reality of today's world. Is that what we're doing? That's a helpful question for us, personally and in our churches. To ask these kind of questions is to reflect critically but constructively on what we're doing as a church. And to ask is also to ask the kind of question that can lead to a little bit of pruning. Vines are pruned so that energy and nutrients are challenged into producing grapes, and not just yards and yards and yards of fruitless wood. And maybe there's a thought for us there. Are all the activities that we're doing focused on bearing fruit? So through our celebration of the stories, through our prayer and reflection, and in the core business of being the church, we are to remain connected to the vine, who is Jesus. Amen. We listen now to a very simple little hymn, which is very relevant in this time of COVID and restrictions, and which reminds us that the church is wherever.